homes or money's not working. Things that used to work just aren't working anymore, and it feels like the end of the world. It's really just an old way of existing falling apart. But it's happening to us individually, but it's starting to show itself in the greater scope of it, the planet. So, the biggest problem are people being unconscious to this, not being aware of it. I remember specifically when war breaks out on American soil, Americans don't believe war could ever happen here. They've never seen it other than a civil war. Our generations don't even know what that's like unless they've joined the military and gone and been involved in war. People at home here don't really know what that's like. And I distinctly recall that no one had any idea who was shooting at us. Missiles start showering down on the East Coast, hitting government installations. People start flipping out, see this on TV, and they don't even understand the world enough to understand who's attacking us and why they're attacking us.
Okay, you mentioned Russia being involved in this. In the past interviews, you mentioned the East Coast primarily, where the Russians were coming in. I'm sure Alaska is going to be a hot spot as well. What cities do you think are going to be most at risk, and where do you see some of the potential safe areas?
Well, I want to say there's the war stuff that I've seen, there's a lot of safe things. There's rules of nuclear war, and there's only 3 countries that are going to use nuclear weapons, and America is not one of them. So there's never going to be a nuclear detonation. I know people have had visions of that. That's why I mentioned me also having visions of that in New York. Well, there was a terrorist explosion, but in a dream, it was told more of a story to see this nuclear, the most scariest kind of explosion that triggers the world into a new cycle of advancement. So I know lots of people out there listening have had visions of nuclear wars, but I've had visions that specifically address that and clearly say that there's rules of war. And the Chinese have already let us know that. I mean, the Chinese have let the Americans know that if they're ever engaged in a conflict, they'll have no other choice but to nuke 200 U.S. cities if it comes down to it. So it sticks to conventional weaponry. Nuclear weapons get involved when the war moves from America over to the Middle East as Russia comes through Syria to try to get democracy and get out Israel out of there. And that's when Israel fires off one preemptive nuclear weapon, and Russia and China both respond to that with their promises of carpet bombing any country that dares set off one nuke. It's too much of a risk. So it's not mutually assured destruction that's keeping them from doing it. It's basically, here's the rules. And so that's pretty safe, in my opinion, for Americans. Don't have to really worry about that. And also the missile strikes from Russia in the East Coast were very targeted. They had very advanced weapons that could focus in and blow up a government building on a block that also had civilian apartments, for example, on the same block, and just take out the government installation and cause very minimal harm. So most of those strikes are all military strikes along the East Coast. The chaos comes from people waking up that day and turning on the TV or hearing the radio, and people running in the streets and going kind of postal. On the East Coast, on the West Coast, when the Japanese come in, they're coming in person, in fleets, coming up again as peacekeepers to try to bring order, because again, these missiles fall, and in 1 hour's time, once this starts, Americans are all going crazy, running around, driving somewhere, not knowing what to do, totally panic-stricken. And that's where, again, you get that excuse for peacekeepers to come back in and bring order to chaos. And the Chinese will be offering us things: money, a part of a new financial system, freedom from the fear that everyone will have been in after a couple of years of war. But they're never really going to take over. So as they invade through California and Oregon and Washington and start to make their way to the Rockies, America is an armed country. Right. And I don't mean our military is armed. Our civilian population is armed. And they're never really going to be able to successfully do that. But they will be able to occupy parts of the West Coast. And that's where you'll see concentration camps. That's where you'll be seeing people, Americans, being given a choice. Do you want to take this new financial system? And this is where you're going to see the mark of the beast. Do you want a little implant that'll have $100,000 for you to start your brand new life with if you just agree to come to this new world order. And some people will do that. Some people will be in so much fear and terror that they'll just accept anything. And some people won't, and those people will get thrown into concentration camps. And people in Europe and people in Africa and people that are watching stuff on TV, they're going to be seeing the happy Americans coming out with the Chinese for this new world order of sharing the wealth with everyone. They're not going to see the concentration camps where Americans, especially Christian Americans, who refuse to take something like a microchip in their
They will
hand.
show them what they want to show them, especially when China has more control over the U.S. media.
Right. And then once you're in the concentration camp, they'll retinal scan you for, you know, just like your tag mark. And it's horrifying to what I've seen go on.
Okay, now there's several patterns at play. When a military invades a tribe or invades a country, there are certain things that pop up: rape, sexual abuse, torture, human trafficking. These are some of the things that we've already heard about, stories coming out of the Middle East at the hand of what NATO forces, U.S. forces, European forces have been doing. DynCorp is well known to be involved in sex trafficking in the past, and they've still been given contracts by the Pentagon. Senator McKinney confronted Rumsfeld on the fact of this in the year 2006 before the floor of Congress. So, in light of what we have seen in the past, when we know what happens when war takes place, when people are not ready, how big of a factor do you see human trafficking being a problem, specifically trafficking of women to locations outside the United States? How strong of a threat do you think this is?
It's a huge, massive threat. It's not even a threat against enemies of Americans. It's a threat against fellow Americans. So you have to realize, as America, we're going to be sitting here, and sure, an earthquake might pop off over there, or some thunderstorms rip up some stuff over here, but we're still going to stick around. The moment of collapse, especially if it's from missiles falling down, whatever it is, the moment of collapse, that's when people go crazy. We're really addicted to our realities, our money, our cars, our things. If you lose all of that and you're running and abandoning the cities and cars with family or by yourself, there's a level of stress involved that most people don't have a clue about. And people will develop post-traumatic stress. People will see opportunities to steal from one another. People that haven't had for most of their lives will loot and rape and take and steal.
Right.
And in fact, as I recall, the Antichrist, who his chant when I had a vision of him was, give to yourself, above all else, give to yourself. And that's partly what brings the world into chaos, people taking what they want from another. So Americans are their own threat, especially from the East Coast. And I've specifically seen along the Mississippi River Valley is kind of where a lot of those gangs form, kind of like, you know, Mad Max. There's still safe zones, like along the Rockies, especially the eastern side of the Rockies, and it's just God doing his work.
Now, how do you see
He's
Oregon?
just guiding all the people together and that want to be violent towards one region and the people that want to love and work together to another region.
And the state that I'm in, Oregon, do you see anything specific? Of course, we have different regions where we might be facing different challenges. We have the coastland,
well,
60 miles in, you have
not
Portland.
Seen everything that's ever going to happen. So Portland and certainly get some disasters. You guys have volcanoes over there. I know there's at least one volcanic eruption that happens. It's actually very civilized. It blows up relatively rapidly. I don't actually know what city it is exactly. I just know it's a major city. It blows up pretty rapidly, but there's plenty of time for people to evacuate. People follow instructions, and it's very, very orderly.
You know, I do want to mention
very
here,
low death toll,
as a footnote, that not all of this is entirely catastrophic. There are some people that have envisioned there's a book called Ecotopia, and Ecotopia kind of spawned the idea of Cascadia. Cascadia being a large region of the Pacific Northwest that, in theory, could break off from the rest of the country in a meltdown of the economy, of the government as it currently is. And I think a lot of people would view that as a positive thing. Granted, we could deal with the threat of the Chinese. There certainly are a lot of armed men in this state, and there's certainly a lot of wealth that I believe in the future will be funneled, especially food, out of the state. But I do believe, Leon, I'm blessed to be in a place like this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I live in San Francisco, Bay Area. It's beautiful. I wouldn't move just because there's 2 earthquakes coming. I'm just prepared for that and ready to deal and help with my neighbors and get through it.
How do you want to talk about the bigger picture in, let's say, the next 12 minutes that we'll have you, what you feel all of this means? I'll say this. I suspect there is a dark hand that is controlling this whole situation simply to destabilize the vibrational frequency on Earth, as David Icke and many others have talked about. And I can see that hidden hand, that military-industrial complex glove, all over the planet, in Russia's business, in China's business, in the United States. Obviously, a lot of it's spawning out of the United States and Europe. But why do you think all this is really taking place and where this is going to go from here on out?
Well, this is where it's all about spirit and entities and beings and what's really controlling the planet. And as a clairvoyant, one of my specialties is spirits and aliens and demonic forces as well as angelic, but as a healer, I'm generally having to focus on these dark vibrations. I really love quantum mechanics and the concept of a super universe and the fact that we live in our own universe and then there are other universes there. As a Christian and someone who sees beings, I name them. So this super universe is what I call God, and our universe is what I call Christ, and another universe is what I would call Lucifer. And so there's different kinds of universes filled with different kinds of energies and forces. Now, there's one or the other. You're either in alignment with the Creator, so you're kind of doing what the Creator's original intent for everything is to be, or you're following something else, whether it be Lucifer or Nephilim or other dark kinds of universes that pierce ours. These darker ones don't respect our free will, and they're also a bit psychotic, and some of them hate God, and so they want to disrespect it in as much way as possible. And when you look back at one of our earliest governments, the Egyptians, and how they set up a system of control to make one or two people king, the wealthy owner people, the gods in their eyes. There's also a time when these beings came onto the planet. So there are very negative spirits, and they're all over the place. It's like nature. In a cubic foot of air, you've got 10,000 microorganisms. In the ocean, cubic foot of water, probably twice as much. Life permeates our reality. It's also permeating these other universes. The only thing to do here on Earth is have a body. We're human beings, so we're spirits too, but we've got bodies, and so we have the power and we experience this reality, and it's the only thing to do here. So if you don't have a body and you're here, you're hanging around people with bodies. That's what we call spirit guides. And certainly an angel that's helping guide you down your life is a spirit guide, but a nasty being that wants you to feel bad about yourself, gets in your head and gives you negative thinking. I mean, they're around. Everybody has this kind of vibration, but it's very organized. So if you look at someone like Lucifer, who's kind of the hierarchical of everything, and then you've got devils and different levels of demons and alien vibrations that aren't in alignment with the Supreme Being, or dark spirits that aren't in alignment with the Supreme Being, they're coming through us. Humans have the ability to channel. Like I said, we're human beings, so you have the ability for your spirit to come and sit in your body and occupy it. You also leave your body every night when you go to bed, and you go to the astral plane and you dream.
Sure.
And then
so,
the next
Leon,
day you get back in.
So the phrase psychic protection is not some new age mumbo jumbo. It's something that we ought to be perhaps looking closer at.
Being able to control your energy, our society doesn't teach that, but it's the energy that we're talking about here, these dark vibrations. If we taught everyone in kindergarten simple psychic tools for grounding their body and bringing their spirit in and separating their personal aura universe from everyone else's, those demonic forces would never have a grip on control. That's why we have a programming system. Little kids go into school and they're told what's real and not real before they really hit adolescence and have a chance as spirit to get in their body and bring their own truth in. By then, they've been programmed up the yin-yang, what's real, what's not real. So we do have these a television is an alien technology. It was invented in San Francisco by a man who fiddled around. But I have no doubt that there were alien energies channeling through him, helping him to do that. Create